While you're joining us, if you are able to put your name and organization in the chat, that would be helpful. That's our sign-in sheet. There's someone typing. If you could mute if you're not talking, that would be great.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning. Yes.
Oh, fantastic. I've had a couple issues this morning.
Yesterday, my computer did not want to work. It just, I had like 6 different issues. Today, it seems happier.
Well, I think it's the network because I was trying to reach out to several folks yesterday, and they were trying to return calls to me, calls and video. I was having some challenges out here, and that is Verizon. Let's put it out there.
That is annoying. Well, welcome everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. So if you can mute when you're not talking, that would be great. And if you can also put your name and your organization in the chat, then we can know who was here. We'll also be sending this presentation out. We'll be recording it. Zena, maybe we can start recording now. That would be great. We'll be posting it on the website. So welcome. This is the Community Development Fund FY2025 Subrecipient Workshop. If you are an ongoing subrecipient, this will all be review, and we appreciate your coming. If you're new, I think you'll find it really helpful. We're going to talk about, I'll talk about what we're going to talk about. And my screen isn't moving. Okay. Is my screen moving now?
Yes.
Okay. So our agenda for today, we'll be introducing the staff, the Community Development Fund team that you'll be working with. We will give an overview of the Community Development Fund, talk about agreements, which we're in the process of doing, and really importantly, talking about reporting and invoicing. We also have someone from Zoom Grants here to give a demo. We'll talk about what to do if you need to change your budget or performance measures through the year, and then just give you some important dates. So if you don't know the team, this is us. I'm Jennifer Daniels. I manage the Community Development Fund. Zena Abdul Rahman is our administrative grant specialist, and she is the person who you get reminders from. And if you have questions about Zoom grants, she's a great resource. Andrew Hartzig is our management and budget analyst. He is very important. He approves invoices, so make friends with Andrew. Caitlin and Rolda are the 2 project monitors. They are community development planners, and each of you has been assigned one of them. So they will be the person who will be working with you if you need technical assistance. When it's time for you to be monitored, you'll hear from them. If you have questions about reporting, that will be them. So, and here's all of our contact information. So as I mentioned, we're in the process of putting together agreements. As you know, your funding starts July 1, which is next week already. You cannot be spending funds until agreements and purchase orders are in place. So many of you have the agreements already. Some we haven't routed them yet. It's all going to be routed via DocuSign to authorized signers. One thing that always takes us a while is that authorized signers may or may not be you or the CEO or executive director. Sometimes it's the board chair. So Zena always works with our county attorney's office every year just to confirm who's able to be signing corporate documents. So sometimes that can take a while. If that changes, please let us know. As we're doing agreements, all backup documentation does need to be uploaded to Zoom Grants. So you may not remember because the application was more than a year ago. We didn't require all backup documentation as you were submitting the application, and the idea was to make it just a little bit easier for you. At this point, we need all of your backup documentation. So that includes your W-9 and any other sort of organizational documents that you didn't upload at the time. So financial policy manuals, things like that. Because when we come to monitor you, we're going to need it anyway. So if you can get that all uploaded, that would be great. So back to agreements, I'm a little out of order. So once your agreements are executed, it will be emailed to the staff listed in Zoom grants. So usually for most of you, that's the executive director and whoever your grant writer is. If somebody else needs it, let us know. Also, let us know if you need a hard copy mailed, because we're not really doing that anymore. And again, if you want direct deposit, which I think all of you do, we do need your most recent W-9. So just quickly going to give an overview of the Community Development Fund, and this matters because it matters what your funding source is. As you probably know, the Community Development Fund is made up of 4 different funding sources: Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, Community Services Block Grant, or CSBG, Community Services Block Grant, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, which is a mouthful, and Affordable Housing Investment Fund. We also, within this pot, do administer some county general funded programs, and under that we use CDBG general guidelines. So quick question, this little quiz: do you know which funding source your grant is? And you don't have to answer that, but if you don't know, you should. So that will be in your agreement. It would also be in your award letter. It would also be in Zoom grant. So the reason why that matters, and we'll go through this a little bit, is your reporting is going to vary depending on your funding source, because our funders have different requirements. So just some community development specific terms you may or may not hear, but we figure we can do a little glossary. Because we are the recipient of these funds, you all are the subrecipient. So when you hear yourselves referred to subrecipient or subgrantee, that's what that means. Sort of an archaic term that we still use is a PE form, or program evaluation form. And that is actually Exhibit B of your agreement. That's the stuff that Rhoda and Caitlin have been going back and forth with you on program strategies, performance measures, demographic leveraging information. So that's going to be an Exhibit B again in your agreement. Also in Zoom grants, that will be the program evaluation. So that's going to be all of your kind of program reporting stuff. You may or may not hear this term, the consolidated plan or annual plan. Those are planning documents that we need to submit to HUD, which is one of our major funding sources. And that outlines strategies, programs, and resources. So your program and your performance measures will be reported and uploaded into our annual plan. And the way we report at the end of the year, we call the CAPER, the Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report. That's the annual report that we submit to HUD. So if you're CDBG funded, that will go to HUD. If you're funded through something else, you will also be incorporated into the CAPER, although that won't be sent to HUD, that will be sent to the state for your funding report. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Caitlin, who's going to talk about kind of more specifically what each funding source is, what your requirements are, and anything that you should know specifically. So Caitlin, on to you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. So the first funding source that I'm going to talk a little bit about today is the Community Development Block Grant funding source. So this is a HUD program, as Jennifer mentioned before. And so all CDBG funded programs must comply with Title 24 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 570. Under this source, your program can serve clients up to 80% of area median income. And if you're not sure what that means, we'll talk about that in a couple slides. There are also additional requirements that CDBG funds must adhere to. So some of those are, your program must be offered in a Section 504 Americans with Disabilities Act compliant location. And it basically is just to ensure that all federally assisted programs are physically accessible to all beneficiaries. And there are other, areas that you have to comply with, including the Fair Housing Act and some conflict of interest requirements. Those are all things that are in your grant agreement, and we'll also be talking about when we are monitoring you. There are other areas that are applicable, such as the National Environmental Policy Act and Section 3 and other requirements. Those are less applicable to most of the programs that are funded under the Community Development Fund, but if they do apply to, your program monitor will let you know and work with you to determine how you can comply with those requirements. The next funding source that I wanted to talk to you about was the Affordable Housing Investment Fund Housing Services Set Aside. So the Affordable Housing Investment Fund, as most of you know, is generally a bricks and mortar development program. We the county makes loans to developers to build affordable housing, but there is a set aside through AHIF that is provided for housing services programs. AHIF grants are generally awarded for 2 years, and they're typically non-renewable, which means that after you are awarded the grant for the first 2 years, if you reapply, you'd be eligible for one of the other funding sources. If this is your first year with an AHIP grant, you do not need to reapply next year. You're automatically eligible for the same amount of funding in the second year. As far as CDBG and AHIP reporting, this is generally the basic demographics information that we request from all beneficiaries that are funded with CDBG and AHIP each year. HUD defines all the race and ethnicity categories, and so we use the same categories for both CDBG and AHIP. You are required to report race and ethnicity and income of all your beneficiaries, and that's a federal requirement. And the income level is based on the area median income, which we'll again talk about in a couple slides. As far as income, you are able to allow your beneficiaries to self-report this information if necessary, and so that usually is done on an intake form, or when you're accepting referrals for your clients. But that information has to be obtained, and you have to be able to show in your documentation when you are monitored the income level of all your beneficiaries. Something to keep in mind is that the total number of individuals or households assisted under both your race and ethnicity table and your income table have to match at the end of the year. So yeah, I'm going to move on to the next funding requirement, which is the Community Services Block Grant. So the Community Services Block Grant is a pass-through funding source through the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and it's administered through the Virginia Department of Social Services. CSCBG funded programs must comply with Title 45 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 96, and the income levels of beneficiaries served for CSBG are much, much lower than CDBG. So you can serve clients up to the 200% of the federal poverty level. So it's extremely low income. As far as TANF is another funding source that is allocated biannually through the Virginia General Assembly, and it's passed through the Community Services Block Grant Program. Again, CSBG, TANF and CSBG income requirements are the same. You can serve clients up to 200% of the federal poverty level. There are some additional TANF-specific requirements that your program must meet. So programs that are funded through TANF must include, the beneficiaries must be a family that includes a minor child. And costs that are incurred through this program must relate to work subsidies, education or training, childcare, transportation, and services are generally not to be considered assistance under this program. As far as reporting under CSBG and CSBG TANF, it's much more extensive than CDBG and AHIF reporting, and that's again because of our funder for this program. It's required by the state. One thing about this reporting, however, as opposed to CDBG, you can still report on a beneficiary even if you don't have all of this information. So some of the categories, it gives you the opportunity to say, we weren't able to obtain this information. So just keep that in mind when you're doing the reporting for CSBG and CSBG TANF. But some of the areas that you're required to report on are gender, age, ethnicity, family type, family size, education level, and several other characteristics. So this is just a screenshot of what the reporting table looks like. It's going to look a little bit different in Zoom Grants, and you'll see that when we do the demo in a couple of slides. This is again just the continuation of the reporting categories. As far as the income limits, again, we talked about this. All programs under the Community Development Fund are required to report on beneficiaries based on their income. And so this income table is in both the notice of funding availability that you responded to late last year, as well as in Zoom grants. And so you need to be able to check when you're reporting on the income of your beneficiaries, that you can use this table to cross-reference to see where each of your beneficiaries fit under those reporting categories. So moderate income, low income, very low income, extremely low, and then it also includes the poverty or the CSBG federal poverty level income limits as well by household. So I think with that, I am going to pass it over to Andrew, who's going to talk about invoicing.
Good morning, everybody, and good to see a lot of you again, and hi to the new folks that are on. First, just thank you for everyone who's a 24 recipient, FY24, that got their invoices in. I was on leave last week, and we were rapidly getting these invoices out and paid, so hopefully the money comes to you ASAP. If you are an FY24 recipient and you have not submitted your last invoice, please do so today. So for a lot of you, this is repeat. If not, just want to go through what I and the county's finance department looks for when we pay these invoices. There's different checks and balances in place that we have to adhere to. This sort of covers us when we are audited. We are audited not infrequently on these programs. And so if these are all in a line, we don't have to bother you all, and the auditors get off both of our backs. So couple things, as you know, you use Zoom grants. When you submit your invoice through Zoom grants, there's an option to upload a PDF, and that's what we look for on these invoices. And I've listed out the things that we look for when approving the invoices. The first is on your cover letter for your invoice, you need to include your purchase order number. We don't have those yet for FY25. We will be getting those to you as soon as we can. That email will come from Zena. And with that number, please put that in your cover letter. Some of you all have more than one grant from us. And that number helps us identify which one of your grants we are reimbursing for. Please put an invoice number on the cover sheet. Make it up. Or if you use your own internal process for an invoice number, use that. It can be as simple as invoice number 1, or as complex or whatever you use internally. Our finance department just asks that you don't use a date for an invoice number. So don't say, invoice number 06-24-24. This is a big one with your invoice, and it's submitted through Zoom Grants too. We need to see backup or supporting documentation to justify the cost that you're asking for reimbursement for. We need to be able to see backup for every dollar that is being requested on your cover letter, for everything except for indirect costs. So any of your personnel expenses, your salary, your benefits, any of your contracted services, your consultants, your travel, your supplies, etc. If we are giving you reimbursement for your grant, we need to see the backup for it, except if it's an indirect cost. And again, this helps us when we're audited. If we don't have it and we're audited, we will be coming back to you. Sometimes we're audited 2 years after the fact. So to have to go back and look for something that's 2 years old, we get it. It's a lot. It's annoying. So we try to get that covered at the beginning so we don't have to deal with it later. Next slide. Here is an example of a cover letter that we look for. I've highlighted the things that we look for on the cover letter, the date, the purchase order number. It does not have to look like this. Use it in whatever format you want to, but the purchase order number and invoice number. Please say on the cover letter how much you need your reimbursement for. And the reason we ask for this, yes, it goes in Zoom Grants too, but our Zoom Grants platform does not talk to the county's internal finance software. So even though you put $20,000 into Zoom Grants, our system, we use an Oracle system, does not talk to Zoom Grants. And so as the auditors go in and go through our finance system, they're going to see these cover letters. So that's why they'll want to see the amount that's on there. And they ask that you just also put what the program is and the dates that we are reimbursing you all as well. I'll let you look at that for a second before we go to the next slide. So I just want to go over the different types of backup and supporting documentation that we look for. We realize that all of you all have different systems you use. Some of you all are bigger, on the sort of support services you all use. Some have fancy payroll system, others do not. So this is going to vary. We will work with you to make sure it fits what we're looking for. We try not to be sticklers for this, but we do need to justify all the dollars. So if you're asking for reimbursement on your personnel stuff, examples of what you could submit could be the timesheets with the salary paid, pay stubs, different payroll records. I know a lot of you all put the hours worked by the grant type. If we have the salary and the contract or the agreement with you all, we can go in and look at the hourly rate and sort of extrapolate that out. Benefits are not an indirect cost. So if you're asking for reimbursement on benefits, please include something that speaks to the benefit part of it. Pay is different. We need to see the backup on the benefits as well. If you're seeking reimbursements for your non-personnel stuff, things like receipts for your purchases, invoices, for example, if you've gone out and got a consultant or something like that, some sort of proof of payment we need to see on that. We are trying to do a better job of if you submit, a larger timesheet and only a share of that timesheet is for your grant from us. And if you get other grant funding sources, we are trying to move into a world in which that timesheet differentiates what the Arlington grant is paying for. That is advice we got from HUD. If your system allows for your employees to say, okay, in this 40-hour week, I did 20 hours for Arlington and 20 hours for Alexandria or whatever the other grant source is. If your system allows it, please note that. If not, I'll work with you. We can just include a note somewhere on there. But that has come through HUD. So we want to make sure that we pay closer attention to that. Does anybody have any questions before I move on backup documentation? I know that sometimes this can be sort of what trips up us getting your payments back. If not, here's my contact information. You've probably heard from me, so feel free to ping me. Next slide. So I just put in different examples of what we've typically seen. This is just example of an employee's earning record, and you can see, how much they've earned in a certain pay period, which is fantastic because it includes the benefits as well. Next slide. Here's another one, just a payroll register. Again, it includes the benefits and salary that this employee earned. Super helpful, but like I just mentioned, this one doesn't separate how much time was worked on Arlington versus another grant. These systems may not be complex enough to do that, and that's fine. But we might come back on questions on that just to ask for some sort of breakdown of how many hours were worked for our grant specifically. Next slide. So reporting and invoicing. I know a lot of you all will submit your invoice when you submit your reporting. They are looked at sort of separately. I look at the invoices. Caitlin or Rolda looks at the reporting. Caitlin and Rolda also vet the invoicing. I don't necessarily look at the reports, so they could be your invoices can be submitted with your reports or separately. Here's the note: they will not be approved unless reports are up to date, except for the fourth quarter report. The reason for that is that we have to, as you all probably do yourself, we have to close out our systems. We have to talk with HUD. We have to talk with the state of Virginia, pull money down from them. And if we get that later into the next fiscal year, it totally jams things up. So that's why we pushed for invoices to come in before the end of the fiscal year. So we can get that going so that our closeout runs smoothly and we're not running to you all needing more information. The more time we have in between your last invoice coming and when we close out, the better, just for those last lingering questions we may have. Next slide. So this one is a bit bulky, but invoicing for your cost incurred. I'm not going to read through this whole thing, but essentially the point of this is that if you get a $20,000 grant from us and you hit that $20,000 by October, you can invoice us for that $20,000 as soon as the costs are incurred and expended. You still need to submit all your backup documentation. You don't need to necessarily break it up 5, 5, 5, 5 throughout the fiscal year. If you do one invoice for us, that's a lot less work for you to have to do 4 different invoices. You still have to report quarterly. That's in your contract, that's in your agreement. Quarterly reports are still required. That requirement is not alleviated if we've given you your entire $20,000. That is required per the agreement. Yeah. So anyway, we still need to know that reporting stuff for the entire fiscal year and who you're impacting, like Caitlin went over. But if you want to submit your invoice early for the full amount, have at it. We are happy to take it. But just make sure that you've expended all that. We have the backup documentation, and that you will continue to submit your reporting as per your agreement. And I think that's my last slide. So I will hand it off.
Thanks, Andrew and Caitlin. All right, back to me. So throughout the year, you might need to make changes to your budget or your performance measures. You might have a new staff person who's at a different salary. You might realize that your performance measures are too low or too high, or you're actually accomplishing something differently than you thought. We do ask that you get approval before you make those changes. So we ask that you submit the request to your county project monitor. So that would be Caitlin or Rolda, and including an explanation for why the change is requested. Preferably a comparison of approved and revised budget or performance measures. So you can see, well, the revised budget is actually more than the, okay, so don't look at this example. I want 7,000 more than I was approved for. Obviously, your revised budget would need to be the same as your original budget. But if you want to make a change before you bill us, please do let us know, and please do get approval. So a lot of times you might submit a proposal that has, a position that's TBD. We think we're going to hire at $25 an hour or whatever. You end up hiring them at $28 an hour. That's fine, but you need to let us know so we can make the changes in Zoom Grants, and because you're going to be billing against your budget. So that's an important step. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer Yost from Zoom Grants, who will give us a demo on how to use Zoom Grants. So if you've used it before, this is going to be a refresher. If you haven't, this will be really helpful. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Jennifer, I think you're here.
I am.
Yay.
Good morning, everybody. As Jennifer said, my name is Jennifer, and I am with Zoom Grants. And so I'm going to walk you through how to do the invoicing and reporting within Zoom Grants. You can always reach out to Zoom Grants if you have any technical issues with the system, but if it is a program question, we will always refer you back to Arlington County, as we cannot answer those. But with that, I am going to share my screen. Just one moment. Okay. And so, oops, all the way through my presentation. Hold on one moment. So this will be shared with Jennifer and her staff so that they can share this with you afterwards as well. So do not worry about having to take notes. But you're going to log into Zoom Grants the exact same way that you logged in for the application. So you're going to be able to go and see that directly. When you dig in there, you're going to be able to see your screen, and I will do actual live demonstration as well, but these are some screenshots so that you can maintain it. You're going to navigate to your approved application. So once Arlington County has approved your application and has officially notified you within the system, it will move from your submitted application section here into your approved applications. This one's just slideshow mode, sorry. Make it a little bigger for everybody. They'll go into the approved application list. From there, you'll be able to access your application. You're able to actually update your collaborators. So anybody that you invited to have access to editing your application, you can now give them access to editing reports and or invoices. You can also invite new collaborators the same way, and I will walk through how to do that in the live application. For submitting your invoice, you're going to navigate to the financial tab, and you're going to click add invoices. This will, or create a new invoice button, and it will open up the new invoices for you. And you'll also see the button on your user interface. You're going to complete everything that's within the invoice, answer any of the questions, input the numbers that you're requesting, and upload all that documentation that Andrew talked about. Once you are done with all of that information, you're going to hit that invoice button. It will then create a timestamp using Pacific time, showing that it has been submitted. And that will then be sent to Andrew automatically through the system for him to be able to conduct his review, and if necessary, return it for any corrections that need to be done. For submitting the reports, same way, you're going to navigate into your application or use your add report button that will take you directly to the reports. You're going to have 4 reports that are going to be due with Arlington County, and the 4th one being the final one. You're going to click on the report that is actually due to be able to access the questions that you need to answer. You're going to upload any required documentation to answer those questions. That first question is going to be really important about what your funding source is, because as Caitlin stated, your funding source is going to dictate what questions you need to answer throughout your report. And then you're going to hit that submit report button once you're done. If it comes as, oh, wait a minute, there's some fields missing, it will stop you from submitting. So it is important that you answer all of the questions that relate to your funding source. And that is just a quick overview of how to do that. But now I'm going to actually go into a live test application that we have. So you as a applicant or subrecipient will go into your user profile, just as you did for applying for the funding. I did want to state that within your profile, you actually control your user profile. So if you have a name change, you can update your name. You can change your address. You can also, if necessary, change the organization name, as well as change your password. This is also if someone has left your organization and you need to reset that password or change the name of who owns this, you can do that. It's really important when you are actually, you may have changed the domain of your email. You went from a .net to a .com. You can actually change it in here as well. So I could put a .net here, and now that would actually change my user ID and the email in which all the notifications is actually going to go to. So it's one way that you can actually update your own user profile. I'm going to go back into my account list. And as I said, you have all these incomplete applications that you may have been working on. You can also delete them if you're like, that was a duplicate. I want to actually clean up my own profile. You can remove them. But all your approved applications for any community that you're applying funds for will be over here. And then you can click on the add invoice button or add demographic and income report. It should also go directly into your application. I always recommend going directly into the application because you may have actually clicked the invoice button before and you want to go finish the invoice that you were working on. It's going to look very similar to exactly how it looked for your application. In the program cover sheet button tab, that is where you're going to actually add collaborators. You're going to scroll down, and this is where you're going to add a collaborator and give them the appropriate access that you want, or update if they're already in there. So an email address, first name, last name, their title, and what part of the application you want to give them editing access. If they are going to have access to the report, they also have to have access to the application because of that program evaluation form that is required. You can also add that person as an additional contact, or you can add a person down here as an additional contact. If they're just marked as an additional contact, they do not have access to editing. They will just receive email notifications. So if you want to have email notifications and have access, you can provide them as both. Please note, Zoom Grant staff and Arlington County staff cannot add collaborators, only the applicant owner. And the person listed here under applicant information is the applicant owner. So if the person who is the applicant owner has left your organization, please reach out to Arlington County or Zoom Grants, and I can actually provide that information to Arlington County to pass on to you, so that the ownership can be changed. We can only accept ownership change from Arlington County, the executive director of the organization, or the person who's leaving. So it's really important that we get all the information we need to actually, for us to actually change it when someone has left and you're unable to make that change yourself. So just want to make sure I'm covering everything I was supposed to. So up here is where you're going to click on the report. So you have two report tabs. You have the reports and you have totals. So I'm going to show you the reports. This is where you're going to see those 4 reports that are available. So you want to make sure you're selecting the correct one. First question you have is, what is your funding source? As Jennifer said, you can find this in your contract, but you also can find it within Zoom Grants. It's up here in the upper right-hand corner, right under application status of approved. You'll see what that funding source that has been assigned to this actual application. And that is what you want to mark, because based upon what you mark here, will change the questions that are down below. So it's really important to click the correct one. Also is report number 4. That is the final report. You do need to make sure that you're clicking the funding source and that it's the final year-end report, because there's an additional question that needs to be answered for those funding sources. So you're going to input the data that you have collected for that quarter, so that Zoom Grants has that information. And it's going to actually ask, have you completed the performance evaluation form tab above? It's just a quality control check to make sure that you've come up here and actually completed this form as well. You do need to come in here and answer these questions based upon which quarter it is. It is necessary for Arlington County to have that information that they need to report to HUD and to the state. Your demographic income report totals. This is a way that you can do a quality check on yourself of looking at each of your quarters that have come in on each that you've inputted prior, and looking at those totals. So you can sit there and go, oh, why does that say 1,000? It should be more like 10. So you can go back and identify, I need to make an edit, or I need to, if you still have access to it, or to contact Arlington County so that they can return it to you so you can make the appropriate edits. And as again, you're going in the totals, you will see all the questions. So that is something to note, is you're going to see all the questions that are in the system, not just the ones that you've had to answer. So coming back here, if we were change this from general fund, click on that and change it to CSBG funding, you're going to see that a whole lot of different questions show up. And that saving button sign that you saw, our system does do auto save. But if you double click before that saving button turns off on its own, it has not saved any of your data. So it's really important. If you spent a lot of time writing up a narrative and you double clicked out of that saving, it did not save it. So it'll be just blank. But when you click out, and I put 1 here and I click out, it auto saves. So you can see it's automatically saves. But if it gets hung up for some reason, such as if you are having internet connectivity issues, and you click during that saving cycle, it does not save. But you can see all these other questions start showing up for the other funding sources. Really important that you're clicking the correct funding source. Down at the bottom is where you will have an opportunity to upload any documents. We have a miscellaneous if there is some information you want to share, but that year-end narrative report will also be required here. Now, to go to submitting an invoice, we're going to go to the financials. You can see I've already created one just to give a quick example, but you create a new one by a new invoice. You, the applicant, are the only ones that have the ability to delete a unsubmitted invoice. So if you accidentally created 3, you can delete 2 of them and work on that third one. Arlington County cannot delete unsubmitted invoices. You'll also see what your approved budget is. Down, if you scroll all the way down, you'll see what you were actually approved in each of those line items that Jennifer was talking about. If you go into this invoice, I'm going to open it all the way up, and you'll see the first thing at the top is the PO number. This is the number that Andrea was talking about that you need to make sure is in your cover letter as well. So you want to make sure that you're putting that in your cover letter. The invoice number is that invoice number that you create. And as Andrew stated, please don't use dates. Who is the contact person? It may not be that applicant owner. So making sure that he knows who to contact. We have the instructions, which inputting your quantity and rates is necessary. If you don't input both of these, the system will not auto-calculate that requested amount. So it is important that you put in both those numbers on the line items you're requesting. And then we do have a quality control check of like, have you confirmed that the subrecipient invoice cover letter includes the information? It should be marked yes. And then you're going to upload the required documents. The invoice cover letter and the supplemental documentation is required. You will not be able to hit the submit button and actually submit it unless those documents are uploaded. So you're going to come over in here and you're going to click that upload button. You're going to get a new screen that pops up. And this is where you're going to be able to give the description to the documents you're uploading. You're going to be able to choose that file and be able to go and find it on your own server to be able to upload the document that you're trying to upload. You're going to select it, click open, and it's going to provide there. And so it's provided. Please note file size is limited to 4 megabytes. So if you have a 500-page backup document, it may be over that file size. 100 usually is not, but you can see the variety it is. You can break up large documents and upload 2 documents to the same slot. So just calling it part 1, part 2. But once you've got that information, the file name, and you've got the file uploaded, you hit the upload now button. And then it's good. Your file has been uploaded. Test the link on your document.
Oh, I can't find what I'm looking for.
Yes, you have to hit the upload. So you're going to see, here's the link. You're going to have the document and you're going to have an upload here. You can click on this to test and make sure that it's been uploaded. You're going to close it. You're going to see it's right here, but it's not interactive. If you hit that refresh page button, it will become interactive and you can confirm that the document has been uploaded. So, but you have to make sure and hit that yes button or Andrew's going to return it to you. Okay. And if I had made a mistake and I wanted to completely delete it, I didn't want to go through the process of making this edits on that one, I could always hit that delete button and it'll go completely away, especially if I have duplicates. With that, I am done unless there are questions.
Thank you. Are there questions for Jennifer? And again, she is a wonderful resource, and as is county staff. Kelvin, I see you have a question.
Yeah, I did have a question, Jennifer. As far as I wanted to make sure that I was clear on what you were saying, that collaborators on the project with you adding and removing them as the administrator. You're saying that in addition to removing them, that we need to also reach out to you and to the county?
To remove collaborators, no, you do not. You can add and remove collaborators as you want. If you need to change who owns the application, the person has left your organization and it's going to an email that is no longer being monitored, you're like, they're the owner and you need to change it to the executive director or the person that's replaced them. You definitely need to reach out to the county at a minimum. The link that the information I will provide to Arlington County that they can send to you afterwards will be a link to our instructions on how you can change the ownership if you still have access to their. If you no longer have access to an email account, Zoom Grants must actually do the transfer of who owns this application.
Okay.
So ideally, you will do it internally before that staff person leaves.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wendy. We cannot hear you. Wendy, we can't hear you. I don't see that you're on mute, though.
Right. Is this any better?
Yes.
Thanks. Thank you so much. So I often have problems on the invoice page. And, I'll start an invoice. Maybe I'll take a phone call. I'll get distracted. I get timed out. And I can't figure out how to get back to what I started. So I have to sort of start all over again. And I end up with a lot of not submitted invoices in the system. So can you just help me a little bit figure out how to navigate to where I see that list of invoices so I know which ones to delete and maybe go back into one that I started?
Yes, definitely can do that. So when you sign back into your account, you're going to go to your home page. And this is where you're going to go over to the approved applications. You're going to find the correct application. Instead of clicking on the add buttons, you're going to actually click on your application name. So whatever you named it this year. And that will take you to the landing page. We're going to see all those instructions. So we're going to hide those instructions so we can get down to the tabs. The financial tab. And the financial tab will list all of your invoices, whether they're unsubmitted, submitted, listed as paid, whatever status they're in. So all the invoices you've created, and you're like, oh, I created 12 on accident, where you can actually then go through and delete the ones that are unsubmitted. If they've been submitted to the county, you can't delete them, but if they're unsubmitted, you can do that cleanup, as well as you can return directly to that invoice.
So if I clicked on if I click on the invoice number, I go back to the work that I started that hadn't been submitted yet.
Correct.
Thanks. Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions for Jennifer? Wonderful. Well, you can always reach out to her or to us and we can get you good answers. Zena is good at figuring out a lot of the Zoom grant stuff too, so she's often a good first start. So I'm going to share my screen again. Is the presentation showing up again?
Yes.
Yay. Okay. So final slide, just wanted to give you some important dates. So the beginning of grant year is next week, as we know. First, second, and third quarter reports are due the 15th after the end of the quarter. The end of the year is a little bit different, as we've mentioned. Final invoices are due June 15th, and that can be confusing because it might not be the end of your fiscal year. However, as Andrew was explaining, we need to close out our year end. So we do ask that you submit final invoices by June 15th. Final reports are due July 1st. We have a little flexibility with that if you're still trying to, put together beneficiary information, things like that. But we have to quickly start turning around information and reporting back to our funders. So we do ask that you get final reports in as quickly as possible. And I think that is it. So I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you for all the work that you do. I also wanted to let you know if you're looking out for the 2026 NOFA, which is crazy, that's going to be released, I think, next Friday. So keep an eye out. We'll also, if you're an existing subrecipient or applicant or you've applied before, we'll send you a notice. Did I get the date right, Caitlin? I think I did. Is it next?
It's going to be on the 8th, actually.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So
July
8th is an exciting day. So again, we appreciate your participating. Does anyone have any questions? And if you've now put your name and organization in the chat, we'd appreciate you doing that before you leave so we have a record of who was here. Great. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day and stay cool.
Bye.
You all,
Thanks, you all.
thank you so much.
Bye.